Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to YANA's monthly town hall. My name is Ken Inadomi, proud to be the chair of YANA, the Yale Alumni Nonprofit Alliance. And we got a really exciting program tonight on capital campaigns. This is a topic that we really haven't covered, but it's such an important one, and it's something that all social impact leaders should know, especially today when fundraising there's such an importance on it. One of the things I'd like to always open our YANA discussions is that YANA is a nonprofit ourselves. And basically, similar to the NPR model, we are dependent on donors, listeners, and viewers like yourselves for our support. So if you find any value in previous YANA events, whether there are forums, town halls, workshops, or tonight's event, please consider making a gift and supporting our work. It's so important to not only help the current generation of social impact leaders and nonprofit leaders, but the up and coming generation of social entrepreneurs that we do so much to nurture. Now for tonight's event on how to launch a capital campaign. I'm proud to present our two speakers, Peter Heller and Betsy Steward. They are from the Heller Fundraising Group. They're longtime friends of YANA. We've learned a lot from them. Peter is a former presenter at YANA, and he has a remarkable ability to say a lot of information in a very succinct, understandable way. So please pull up a chair and get ready to be enlightened on the how, the when, and the why of conducting a capital campaign. Peter, Betsy, it's all yours.
Thank you, Ken. You know, with that introduction, I'm kind of feeling like I should, I can't think of anything to say. But thank you. I have been an honorary and occasionally paying member of YANA, so I'm grateful for that connection. And Betsy and I are both with the Heller Fundraising Group. I just want to, just one really quick logistical thing is that Betsy and I found out she may have an emergency phone call she has to take at any time. So if she disappears, I will just jump in for whatever she's saying, and then we'll handle it. And so if you see her disappear, that's what's going on there. Fundraisers need to roll with the punches. And I'm going to pull up some slides in just a moment. I want to thank Ken and Rachel and YANA for inviting us. And, I know for many of you, it's evening. Where I am, it's 6:30. And, we all have so many decisions to make all day long these days that we're going to try to make this like easy listening, not quite Muzak, but try to make it as easy as possible on everybody and have a enjoyable presentation and have some pauses for a Q&A to keep you engaged. It's a really important subject right now for nonprofit organizations on how to conduct capital campaigns given the world that we're in and kind of coming out of. So before I start my slides, I'm just going to grab a quick link, and I'm going to put it in the chat for everybody. And this is if you'd like to grab some free fundraising tools from the Heller Fundraising Group, this is the link on our website. I'll also put it in at the end if I remember. I just wanted to get that there before I forget. And now I'm going to share my slides so we have sort of a framing to go along with the conversation. And I tested this before, so I'm pretty sure everybody can see it. Nice pile of $100 bills there. Let's get this going. So I'm going to start with just a few slides introducing our company, so you have some sense of what we're doing here and context for it. And then Betsy will also take a moment and introduce herself. So if you would, most of the slides I'm just going to talk through, but there's a few I'm going to ask you to read. So just take a quick read of our mission here at the Heller Fundraising Group. All right, and then this is a smattering of our clients. We are a company that's located in New York City. Most of our staff live in New York City, and our clients are now pretty much up and down the East Coast from Florida to Maine. We've had some in California and places that are far afield, partially due to COVID, but for other reasons as well. Here's our team. We're made up of a staff of 5 people and then a group of collaborating consultants who come and go. We have probably about 4 or 5 more people than are here. And Betsy, this would be a great moment for you to just say a few words about yourself.
Okay, so I'm a senior consultant with the Heller Fundraising Group, and I have worked there for almost 4 years. And before that, I was director of development for the Westchester Children's Association, and Peter Heller was my capital campaign consultant. So he and I have been working together for 8 or 9 years, and I have the unique position in our company of being someone who is an employee but was a client, which is always kind of interesting. We had a very successful campaign with Peter's guidance, and I've learned an awful lot from him, and I'm glad to be here.
Super, thank you, Betsy. And I don't know if there's any Yale alumni among this group, but I'll have to look into that. So I'll get back to you on that. And a lot of people ask, well, okay, your name is Heller Fundraising Group, but what do you actually do? So we do 5 specific things. We do feasibility and planning studies to get ready for capital campaigns, and then we help nonprofits manage those campaigns. We also, when there isn't a need for a campaign, we help organizations ramp up and assess their development office capacity, as well as run major gift programs with their top tier of donors. And just like we're doing tonight, we do training and coaching programs. So enough about us. Let's talk about you and your potential capital campaign need. I like to start with some sort of visual like this, because this slide makes the whole thing very clear and simple. The purpose of a campaign is to take a big pile of money and stick it into your bank account. Now, there's of course a lot of elements to it, but I don't want anybody to lose track of that this is what needs to happen. And the whole structure you put together to do this is because this is where you want to end up. The next thing I'd like to talk about for just a moment is actually this word campaign. So if you think about it, the word campaign is used in a really limited number of human endeavors. We have capital campaigns, which is what we're talking about now, nonprofit activity. We have political campaigns, marketing campaigns, and military campaigns. Maybe if you can think of another one, stick it in the chat. But the thing that unites all of these is that it requires strategic planning before you start the activity, and then continued strategic work throughout the activity. And that's what happens in a capital campaign, just like these other kinds of campaigns. You need to be organized before you press go, and then you have to continue to roll with the punches. Or if you've ever been sailing, you know, you have to keep seeing where the wind's blowing and what's happening. Here, and by the way, both Betsy and I are going to do a lot of talking, but you'll see that through the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to stop 5 or 6 times to see what the questions or comments might be, so that we have a way of engaging everybody. You know, I wish that you know, we could just have a conversation, but it's hard with a group this size. So I'm also happy to have a follow-up conversation with anybody who wants to chat about campaigns or feels their question or comment wasn't answered. So please take a moment and read this. This is how the Heller Fundraising Group tends to define a capital campaign. And we've been involved in a lot of building campaigns. I actually, before starting this company 17 years ago, I worked at Columbia University for 10 years and 4 other universities before that. So I'm very familiar, for instance, with, you know, university fundraising, and there's often a lot of building fundraising and scholarship fundraising. That's often what it's all about. but you have to motivate your community and your donors about the future of the organization and the future of the community. And Betsy's going to talk about that in a few moments. Just for fun, here's a few what we call bad reasons for a campaign. Not gonna, I could talk about all of those for a while, but I just wanted to throw those out there. And before we dive into the heart of our campaign concepts, which is coming up in just a moment, I wanted to talk for a minute about COVID and the last year plus and what that means for nonprofit organizations. So to me, the most important thing is that if you're going to work at a nonprofit, if you're going to be a board member for at a nonprofit, if you're going to be a donor for a nonprofit, you have to believe 100% that that nonprofit is having a powerful impact on the future of the community it serves. It's no longer okay for it to be meh or, you know, medium boiled or medium rare or whatever. You really have to believe that this organization is going to make a big difference. And you have to align things inside and outside that organization for that to happen. And if you can do that, not only is it going to be inspiring when you wake up in the morning and have to do the hard work of making the organization work, but it's going to be inspiring because you're going to be able to tell a great story to your potential donors that's going to help them maximize what they might give. And in just a moment, we're going to show you our what we call our 6 elements of a capital campaign. There are these 6 elements are kind of evergreen, tried and true, worked before the pandemic. They actually worked during the pandemic. Betsy and I both did a lot of campaign work with organizations virtually, and we still are. And there are some novel solutions that we've come up with based on the world that we're in now. So I just want to pause for a second. Rachel, are there any burning questions from the audience?
Let's see. There's a question in the chat about, or in the Q&A, broadly speaking, is there a size such as revenue below which it's too soon for an organization, you know, based on their annual revenues to launch what would be a capital campaign?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I'd say the perhaps unsatisfying answer is it depends. Betsy mentioned that she worked at a nonprofit before joining our company. Their budget was literally $400,000 a year when we got started, and they successfully completed a $6.5 million capital campaign. But they also had a really robust pipeline of potential donors. So it really depends. I think there's a bunch of factors, and I think these elements will help you understand the answer to that question. So thank you. So we focus all of our work, whether it's preparing for a campaign in a feasibility study or actually rolling out a campaign with our client nonprofits, on these 6 elements, because we find that they're a great organizing tool, and they're actually, it's the things you need to do for success. So we're going to go over each one of them. We will try to be engaging and perhaps occasionally even entertaining. And so here we go. So the first element is the dollar goal. And I'm going to say a few words about the dollar goal and give you a couple of examples. And then at the end of the dollar goal, before we get to the next one, we'll pause again for a minute to see if there's any questions. What do you want to include in your campaign dollar goal? These are all the things we find typically happen. If it's a building, your building costs. If there's program funding involved, with or without a building, you want to do that. Endowment, if that's part of what you want to raise money for. And then you don't want to forget the cost of actually doing the campaign, whether it's for materials, perhaps an extra staff person, even a part-time admin person to help organize things, if there's legal costs, costs involved in hiring consulting firms such as us, that sort of thing. You want to make sure you throw that into the bucket because you want to be able to raise those dollars. This is actually it's funny. This is the organization that I helped Betsy raise the $6.5 million for. It was a very, very simple budget. 3 lines, $6.5 million. We find that regardless of whether you're raising $1 million or $100 million, it's really challenging to put the dollar goal together, even though it might seem simple. We are launching a feasibility study literally tomorrow on a $75 million campaign. And just this afternoon, the organization decided it was going to be an $85 million campaign. So these things are not always easy to figure out. Here's a different dollar goal. This was a synagogue project in Virginia that 5 line items equaling $16 million. Nice and clean because, you know, we rounded things up a bit, but we baked in the costs of doing the campaign percentage-wise into each one of these line items. And then this one, I don't want you to squint and try to see what's there, but it's there because I'm going to show you a few other slides. This is a budget that the project managers and construction managers needed to put together for a $60 million building project in New York City. There was actually a much more complex budget behind this. This is absolutely necessary, but when it comes time to share the budget and that dollar goal with your donor audience, certainly if they want to see this stuff, show it to them, but you want to crystallize it to something simpler. And so we went from this to this, which if you add it up, there's kind of $50 or $60 million. You can see there's still a whole bunch of line items, but then for very, very simple explanation purposes, we got to this, which is, if you look at those first 2 lines there, it was simply new building, $50 million, enhanced programming, $10 million, boom, $60 million. Very, very simple story to tell for a campaign. The final thing I'm going to say about a dollar goal is that once you know what your goal is, you need to put that into metrics that work for raising the money. And this is what we call a gift table. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this tool, but we divide the gifts into basic levels of support. This is for calibration. And you'll see that at the leadership level of this $5 million campaign, 70% of it is hope to come from 8 donors. Generally, that's the way it's going to be. Of course, it's never exactly like that, and you can push some of those top leadership dollars into the major gift level. Whoops, sorry. The more you push there, the harder your work is, but it really depends on your organization and the prospects that you may have available. So we change each gift table per the client, but this is just a sample of how we would like to see something like this. So again, I'm going to stop here for a moment. Rachel, any questions, or anybody in the audience have a question?
Not yet.
Okay. Hopefully people are still awake and engaged. And if that's not the case, Betsy's going to wake them up right now by discussing the case for support, which is our second element. So Betsy?
Oh, hang on. Someone just asked, how do you determine the targets for your gift table? I assume.
Meaning, I assume they mean the prospects. And
sorry.
We actually have a whole section. One of the elements is on the prospects. And I don't want to put this person off, but we'll address that during the prospect part.
Okay.
So thank you. So Betsy, I'm going to put the first slide up here, and then you can just tell me when you'd like me to hit continue.
Well, actually, go back.
Okay.
I'm ready for you to hit.
Go back.
I'm not ready for you. So the case for support is your story. It's what you're going to use to persuade someone to actually give generously. And the way you tell that story makes all the difference. The purpose of a case for support or a case statement is to answer the question, why should somebody support you? You know, there's something like 1.5 million nonprofits in the United States. Why you? Why should we do it to you? Before we talk about how you tell your story, I want you to remember three things. The first one is that most donors do not care about the weeds. They don't care about paying competitive salaries and making sure your software is up to date. They don't care about that stuff. They care about two things. They care about the people you serve and the impact you're having. So when you write your case for support, don't put all that stuff in there. They're not interested in you. You will lose them. Second thing I want to mention is that one part of your job as a fundraiser is to identify and then eliminate any jargon. You know, you're going to be telling the story that you have learned from program people, and those people are in the weeds as they should be. But I've seen many times when people use what I would call jargon because they don't realize it's jargon. To them, it's natural language, but to the rest of the world, it's not really. So you have to find that stuff and get rid of it. And I think the last thing I want to say is that when you prepare the case statement, you have to have the donor's perspective in mind. Don't assume that they know things, even if you think that the donor you're meeting with Thursday afternoon already knows all this stuff. Well, I've seen many times when, yeah, I think they did know, but they forgot because they're not thinking about this every day the way you are. And you never know what they're going to do with the case statement. Are they going to give it to somebody who doesn't know anything about you? So you want to have minimal weeds, but as much information in there as you can have. So let's talk about what we're going to include. Go ahead, Peter.
Okay.
A case statement needs to have a vision for the future. You need to state the problem. People are not aware of the problems, even though you may think they are. I want to give you an example. The organization that Peter and I were talking about that I worked at, and Peter was my consultant, was the Westchester Children's Association, which is a child advocacy organization. And they advocate on behalf of children. And one of the things they do is count children. They figure out how many are there everywhere. And so I know off the top of my head from that experience that there are 26,000 children living in Westchester County below the poverty line. Most people don't know that. They don't have that image in their head. So no matter how obvious you think the problem is, you've got to state the problem. And then you've got to state your nonprofit solutions. You should put in what your nonprofit has done that shows that you are capable of actually taking care of this, the history with data points, and you want to have the campaign budget. And at the end, you want to have a call to action. I should mention that all case statements start out as Word documents. For capital campaigns, they often graduate into graphically designed brochures that are beautiful, but it really starts with writing down all the things on your list. Once you've got your goals in mind, you can add pictures and charts, or sometimes you don't. It really depends on your situation. At Westchester Children's Association, our case never graduated past a Word document. That worked beautifully, and it was absolutely appropriate for us. So it's different for everybody. I want to say about a case statement that it is a very unique document. It does tell a story, but storytelling is not the same as reporting. Yes, you're going to include facts, and of course you don't misrepresent anything, but a compelling story is so much more than facts. A case statement does not need to be comprehensive the way a grant proposal does. A grant proposal, the expectation is that you got to include all sorts of information. A case statement doesn't necessarily need all of that. It's a story. It does need to have urgency and clarity. I always think of a grant proposal as sort of the 20-foot view and a case statement as the 30,000-yard view. So you don't have to have as many details as you normally would. Remember that the purpose of the case statement is to inspire people to give to your organization. Okay, Peter.
All right.
So what shall we name the baby? A campaign name is really important. It must be brief but compelling. The campaign name is the first chance to grab the reader's attention, and sort of in the same way that a newspaper headline gets a person to read the article. It's the same sort of thing. We want the campaign name to spark interest and curiosity enough so that the reader will open the case and read more. You know, a campaign name is a great example of why fundraising is and must be a team sport. It can't just be one person by himself in a room coming up with a name or ideas without running them by somebody. It has to be a brainstorming effort that involves lots of people. And Peter's going to talk in a few minutes about committees, and that's why they're so important, because you do need collaboration when you're figuring out all this kind of stuff, like the title. Next slide. So who is the hero of your case? I think it's too many people to ask people to guess, but the hero of your case really has to be not the nonprofit and not the donors. It's the people who are being served. When you focus your story on them, it becomes compelling. Of course, donors are heroic, and so is everybody who works in the nonprofit world. We're all knocking ourselves out to try and make the world a better place. We're all heroic, but the focus of your story has to be on those who need help but cannot ask on their own behalf. That's compelling. Donors, board members, and nonprofit employees are not compelling, heroic as they may be. We brought some sample brochures just to sort of show you some of the ones that we've worked with. Go ahead, Peter. This is Almost Home, the campaign for the New Irish Arts Center. Think about that title for a minute and pretend you're Irish. We all have a little Irish in us, right? So pretend you're Irish. Wouldn't Almost Home appeal to someone who misses their Irish culture? Let's take a look at the next slide. Here's the inside. I don't know if you can see it or not, so I'm just going to read it. On the right, it says, a new center for a new century for a new Ireland. And on the left, it says, our language, our history, our culture, our humor, all the things that make us uniquely who we are can contribute not just to the relationship between Ireland and America, but to the world. If we don't tell our story, who will? I think that's very compelling. Go ahead, Peter. And here's the next page with a map of Ireland. I don't know if you can tell that's what it is, but that is what it is. And on the right, it says the world-renowned birthplace of great literature and drama, music and dance, the ancestral home of presidents and peacemakers, artists and spiritual leaders, laborers and captains of industry, the land of 1,000 welcomes, a country born in poetry and reborn by innovation. Don't you think that's just perfect for an arts center? I think that really sets the stage to tell the story. Okay, Peter, the next one. We're not showing you the entire cases for support. We're just showing you the first few pages. This one is A Home for the Future of Judaism, the campaign for Temple Roloff Shalom. Already, you know that this is a campaign with a broad vision and a potentially huge effect. Let's take a look at their next page. On the left, it starts with a quote from the rabbi. I won't read that here, but it's a very specific quote to that temple. And on the right, there's a quote from Isaiah. This is the kind of thing that when a reader is reading it, they're recognizing themselves. Oh, I'm part of this community. I'm the tribe that they're trying to find. Let's go on to the next one. And this one, The Future of Judaism, is right here. I won't read all of this either, but you can see they have beautiful pictures that help and encourage people to imagine the vision. Let's go on to the next one. Oh, here's one of my favorites because I just finished working on this. This is from a client who has just finished their capital campaign. The Osney Children's Center, who has been around since 1895, needed a new building to accommodate the kids in the community from all income levels so that they can learn and grow together. Right now, the big conversation in our country is about inclusion and making sure everybody gets what they need. So we came up with Osney Children's Center campaign, Our Children, Our Future. And it's really a game changer for the town of Osney. Go ahead, Peter. This group was given a large piece of land right on the Hudson River. So we included their new view, that's that on the right. And we explained the vision of making sure all children, no matter what their family background is, get what they need to thrive. And that all working families get the childcare they need that will allow parents to work while children are learning. This is something that also has just been so had a spotlight turned on because of COVID and everything else. So it's a very timely campaign. Next slide. And this one has pictures of the children who are being served, which is always engaging. The text starts with a word that I love to use when I talk with donors, which is imagine. I love that word. It says, imagine a society that focuses its best resources on its children, their well-being, their health, their development, their growth into productive adulthood. Isn't that what we all want? It's really compelling already, and I have hardly read any of it. Go ahead, Peter. So here's one that we don't like so much. For one thing, I know it's not actually a black and white picture, but it certainly looks like a black and white picture, doesn't it? In fact, it looks to me like, I don't know, the end of the world or something like that. And the title, The Centennial Campaign, tells me absolutely nothing about this other than that something has been around for 100 years. That's all I know. I have no idea what this is. It's a stark, bleak, unwelcoming picture. And, you know, I didn't work on this campaign, so Peter has to remind me what this was all about because it's really not obvious from that cover. Let's take a look at the second page. Okay, so there's some kids, but look at those kids. It's not very engaging. It's got their backs to us. They're not, and it's not very many. I see the on the left, whatever that is, the top of the building, and then on the right, a couple of kids. It's just not compelling. You need to pick pictures carefully, the same way you're going to pick your words carefully when you're writing the case for support. You know, honestly, I think I would probably only read this if I was in the dentist's waiting office and I forgot my book. You know what I mean? Absolutely nothing else to read. So next slide. And this one, this is their case for support. I don't know how well you can see this, but to both of us, this looks like some kind of boilerplate that was just dropped in there. And there's just not a lot of personal stuff that would pull a donor into it. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to, you know, I sent a sample case statement to one of my clients today, and I said, don't copy it. I just want you to see how it works. It's not right for your organization, but I want you to see a sample one. You don't want to use boilerplate on these things. And Peter, I think that's it for the case for support.
Great. So let's just see if there's a couple questions, and then we'll keep going. We have a few more elements to go over with you.
Mm-hmm.
Hang on, there were a few questions. Someone else made a statement that if an endowment campaign is really about providing perpetual financial support for an organization, and this question, is that true? And then how do you make a compelling case to endow an organization that's focused on a problem that they're hoping to solve one day? I mean, in fact, hopefully all of our nonprofits will all be put out of business someday, but until we fix the world.
Well, you know, Peter, can I answer that for a minute?
Yeah, please.
I mean, there certainly are some things that we all hope will go out of business, but I want to use the Westchester Children's Association as an example of this. That was started in 1914. In 1914, stranger danger was the guy on the street, right? In 2014, stranger danger was the guy on the internet. So in that particular nonprofit's case, I don't ever think they will need to go out of business, because I think new problems come and we need to find new solutions to solve those problems, and I don't think that's ever going to end. If you're thinking about something like the March of Dimes, where they actually succeeded and polio was eradicated, that is true, but it really does depend, I think, on each nonprofit.
I think the question was, is the capital campaign nature change if it's for, you know, establishing long-term financial support or particular projects going forward, versus there's a very specific thing that will be accomplished hopefully within a certain amount of time, I gather. And whoever wrote the question can clarify it if I didn't get that right.
So it seems like there's a question about endowment in there. Is that correct, Rachel?
Well, it says it's just how do you make a campaign, how do you make a compelling case to endow an organization that itself is focused on a problem that's hopefully solved one day? And maybe that's something like the example you meant with eradicating a disease or building a specific center in a specific location or something like that.
Yeah, I think we'd have to talk about the specifics, because you'd want to be careful about if the whole goal was to get rid of the thing, you know, over a short period of time versus, I mean, you know, people want to get rid of cancer. It's around. It makes sense to endow a cancer organization because there's going to be a lot of effort to that for a long time. So happy to talk about that more offline, but I think we should move on. And thank you, Rachel. I'm going to move to the third element, which is prospects, which is really after the case for support or alongside the case for support, is probably the most important of the 6 elements. we'll look at that gift table in just a minute again that I put up earlier. It's really a great tool for answering these questions of how do I have enough, do I know if I have enough prospects? How do I evaluate them? Are the, I have 1,000 donors in my database, but how do I know whether they're going to be able to give those levels of gifts? We work with our clients on using various wealth screening techniques and other stuff sort of homegrown information on people's capacity to give to help kind of sort the list. And then we're going to talk about natural networks in a minute, because not everybody has enough potential donors. So here again is this gift table, and the middle column right in the middle there where it says prospects needed is basically how you're starting to figure out what somebody asked the question, the word perhaps targets, the number of individuals or even foundations or other funding sources that you're going to need to raise the number of gifts that you need to complete your campaign. And we usually use a multiple at the leadership and major gift levels of about 3 to 1. So, and then at the community level, it's lower levels of giving. So it's 2 to 1. And this is how we begin to construct a prospect pipeline, because you can see for this particular campaign, you need at least 184 potential donors. So you need to have a list of 184 people, and then you have to figure out whether those people can match up to these levels of giving. Natural networks is a way to then expand your potential prospect or donor base. And we usually suggest these potential sort of avenues to start brainstorming with your staff, your board members, even current donors about how you might expand your network. We do a lot of work on this type of thing. And then when it's time to start organizing and sorting potential donors, we put them into a spreadsheet like this, where everybody's name and their connection, and then the most important fields we focus on are these 2 with the green arrows. So when it's time to actually get the campaign rolling, we want to make sure that there's a certain amount of activity every month, and we use a metric such as this, or a table such as this, where you put the dates of in that you're going to connect with people, so you know what's going to happen when, and you have the right amount of activity per month. I'm going to go on and talk about campaign committee and then pause to see if there's another question or two. So the committee is really, really important, because you're extending the reach of your arm as a nonprofit staff person to include your board membership and some of your donors. In fact, even some of your staff members who are not involved in fundraising, it's a great place to get them involved, because this group does a handful of things. We usually like to structure it with 2 or 3 co-chairs, 10 to 15 members. It's always variable depending on what the organization needs. And you can also sometimes look at honorary co-chairs. That's kind of fun to do as well. And what does this group of people do? First of all, we always give them a job description as part of the recruitment, so that they know what they're signing up for. And then they do 2 main things. They oversee the campaign, so that the thinking about this complex strategy is not just going to be on the shoulders of a few staff people. And they then help engage in fundraising. And there's a whole lot of different ways that they can do that. The one thing that it's not is we make sure that it's never arm twisting, and that anybody who does not want to directly solicit donors doesn't have to. They can do other things, but we need some people to be involved in the solicitation, and we train them carefully so that it's actually fun to have these conversations. I'm just going to go through this quickly, but we set up a schedule of meetings, either face-to-face or virtual, and to keep the campaign running forward. We usually put together a core group within the committee, 3 to 5 people who are going to be more heavily involved than some other committee members. And so I'm going to pause there again for a moment. Rachel, a question or two?
No, I think people are just eager to know when they can get the slides. frankly.
Oh, they can get them like as soon as I can press send after after we're done. They'll get them with the nice.
We'll share them with everyone.
Yeah. I'll send them to you, and we've got the nice YANA logo on the left. So
Yes, thank you.
what can I say? So Betsy is now going to talk for just a couple minutes about systems and staffing, and we're doing great here.
Good. So systems and staffing are really important. I always think that there are 4 things that drive fundraising: relationship building, compelling storytelling, which is your case statement, knowing best practices in nonprofits, and then the last one is organization. And organization is critically important. It's critically important in any endeavor, and fundraising is no exception. It's not magic. There are systems that we know work, and there are ways of doing things that have proven to be more effective. A lot of fundraisers are really great at many of those aspects of fundraising, like relationship building and all of that, but they fall down on the follow-up. They're not organized enough to make sure that they call Mrs. Gotbucks when she said she wanted them to call. And that's really what we really stress, the importance of systems and the right people to do it. So let's talk about both systems and staffing, and we'll start with systems. So the most important system that you need is a donor database. The finance department or your bookkeeper tracks donation amounts and dates, but that is not enough for effective fundraising. You need to know what inspired the gift, how connected is the donor to your organization, and a whole lot more. The fundraiser's focus really has to be on getting the next gift, not just counting the one we already got. That's the job of the finance department. That's why the primary purpose of a donor database is not tracking donations, although that is part of it. It's much more than that. A donor database tracks donor information, donor history, relationships, cultivation activity, including solicitation, and a lot more. And one thing that it does that's really important is that it provides reports that you can use for analyzing your fundraising. So you can figure out which income stream is working really well and which one isn't doing so well. It'll tell you who gave last year but not this year, who gave to the last in-person gala but didn't come to the virtual one. It'll tell you all sorts of information that will help you figure out what's the best use of your time, because all development people have way too many tasks on their plate, way too many balls in the air. And those reports will help you figure out, how should I focus all this stuff? I want to add one other thing, which is that Excel is not a database. People often think that it is. It's a spreadsheet, and it's a great program. I love it, but it's not a database. If that's what you're using, I strongly encourage you to upgrade. And there are many options out there at this point that are reasonably priced and can help you do what you do. You don't have to go with the most expensive thing. You can get stuff that really works, but I wouldn't use Excel. So a donor database is, I think, the most important, but it's only one of the systems that you need. Let's look at some others. So fundraising database actively managed with gift tracking. And as I said, the finance department is going to track gift income and dates, but the donor database does that too. So the two systems have to be reconciled. You actually do need both systems, even if it seems redundant. They act like checks and balances, and they can help you uncover or avoid mistakes. But also their focus is on different things. The finance department is focused on transactions and money. The fundraising department is focused on relationships. Next thing is a gift acceptance and donor recognition policies. You know, a gift acceptance policy is critically important. We don't actually accept all gifts, believe it or not. Sometimes a gift ends up costing your organization money. Like, for instance, when I was at Westchester Children's Association, someone had donated a huge framed poster that was 5 feet tall and 3 feet wide. It was beautiful. It was from the 1924 Olympics in Paris. Well, to 1924 eyes, I'm sure it was beautiful. To anybody post-World War II, it looked like a bunch of Nazis giving the Hitler salute. So nobody wanted to buy that thing. And at the end of it, we had to spend money to get rid of it. We had to spend a lot of staff time. If we'd had a gift acceptance policy that said, first and foremost, the board has the right to approve or not approve of any gift that's given, or the board has a policy about this stuff, it would have been a really helpful thing. Donor recognition policies, you need to know Are you going to be able to name things for people? Are you going to put their names in the annual report? A really important policy that goes along with this policy, the donor recognition policy, is the gift acknowledgement policy. How soon after a donor sends a gift does he get a thank you letter? Does the donor get a handwritten thank you note as well as the letter, or a call from the ED? Timing on that stuff is really critical. A thank you note that arrives in somebody's mailbox so long after they click donate that they don't even remember donating to it is actually going to do your organization more harm than good. I would set up a policy that includes timing on gift acknowledgement. And then the next thing is the gift agreement letter. That's for pledges, gifts that are paid over time. Often in a capital campaign, you will say, could you give us a gift of $50,000, excuse me, payable over 3 years, which makes it a lot easier for someone to do this, but it has to be documented in a letter, which has to be consistent with all of the letters. And of course, you have to have a time management tool and a task management tool. And how is the development office and the rest of the organization going to communicate? You really need to be able to do that. And you must have a culture of philanthropy at your organization, which means that fundraising is embraced and respected. In so many organizations, it's kind of like the dirty cousin that sits in the corner or something like that. And it's actually, you have to recognize no money, no mission. A culture of philanthropy means people enjoy and respect fundraising. And I'm going to add one more system that's not on here, which is gift processing. In other words, what happens to a check when it arrives in your mailbox? What happens to the donation that someone makes when they click donate? There needs to be a process in place for that. And I think it should be written down so that you can follow it better. Okay, Peter, next slide. So fundraising does better when strategic planning and specific goals are part of your plan, as Peter was talking about at the beginning of this presentation. So you need to figure out how many meetings could you reasonably have in a month. Look at this for just a second. I call this our what if game. I want to just focus on year one for a minute. This starts with some assumptions, like we're going to assume that the average major gift is $10,000. And we're going to assume that 1/3 of our meetings are solicitation meetings and the rest are all cultivation meetings. So cultivation is 2/3 and solicitation is 1/3. And we're going to assume that 2/3 of our solicitation meetings result in a gift. And if that were true, if you actually had, see that first line, 4 meetings in a month starting in May, you'd bring in $50,000 it comes to. If you increase that so that you had 8 meetings, it would go up to $150,000. Dedicated staff where you'd have that many meetings, $160,000. This is a planning tool, so you can figure out how many meetings you should aim to have. It doesn't mean you're going to actually make all of that, but if your goal is to get that many, you have a much better chance of reaching that than if you don't even have any goals. So we like to use something like this because it really helps clarify things. Okay, Peter. Okay, staffing. Is there ever enough? Indeed. The thing is that if you don't hire enough people, you're going to burn out your staff and you may not bring in the money that you need for your campaign to succeed. You absolutely need to think about this. Peter and I have seen so many clients of ours who are pulled away from their job as fundraisers to do all sorts of stuff that needs to be done, but the organization doesn't seem to realize when you pull that person off of fundraising, that means you're not actually out there getting money, which is that person's job. So let's go one more slide, Peter. These are good questions. Do I have enough development staff now before I even start the campaign? And if not, then how am I going to manage a successful campaign? I need to reach out to some prospects, do the solicitations and follow up, plus research. Ideally, I will need someone else to manage campaign systems. Where do board and volunteers fit into this? And what about hiring a campaign consultant who works in our office? Is that something that you want to do? We really have seen situations where the development person is just pulled off of fundraising. And I think part of that is because boards often do not understand the tasks involved in fundraising. So I would say that a lot of my time is spent educating boards and program people about what the development office does. Because people think it's not really work. It really is work. There really are tasks you have to do, and you have to be focused on it. Peter, I think that's all I got.
All right, that's great. Thank you, Betsy. We've just got 2 more concepts, which I'm going to run through not super quick, but quick enough so that we take about 5 minutes on them so we can wrap up in time. And before I do that, I just want to put the free tools that you can get from our website in the chat again, in case anybody wants to get those. There's a handful of things that are really helpful for fundraising, including a couple videos. And before I forget, I just want to let you know there's a slide at the end that has our contact information on it. Feel free to be in touch if you have any additional questions about campaigns or any other aspect of fundraising. And also, if you'd like to get onto our mailing list, we have a one-time per week kind of fun email that we send out. We'd be glad to send it to you. So the final element of capital campaigns that we work on with our clients is what we call timing. So timing means a whole bunch of different things. And when you're looking at timing, for instance, let's look at if you're doing a project that involves physical space. I'm just going to give that as an example because it's very common in campaigns. What are your renovation needs? Do you have to purchase a property? Do you have urgent program needs? Is there a deficit even? Is there something going on that you need to raise money right away? Or if you don't need to raise it right away, how can you schedule out the project so that you can make sure you're raising money close enough to when you need the money that you may or may not then need to get a bank loan or a bridge loan or a construction loan. You have to think about timing also as it pertains to money. So I'm going to just show you a few quick examples of some timelines that we've used to map out the timing of campaigns. This is the one that the Children's Center in Austin, New York, that just finished up their $19 million campaign that Betsy and I helped them run. They actually started on it in 2014. And due to COVID, it's now 2021. It's just finishing now. There was a pause. And originally it was expected to end in end of 2019. They extended it before COVID hit, and then they had to extend it further. But this is not a dollars and cents timing graphic, but it shows when certain activities start. This one is much more Gantt chart, very income expense based. In the income part, it's when they hope to expect to get various tranches of money in, including quiet phase, public phase, and even a pledge period. And then when the various expenses for their capital project will start. And when this one doesn't have it, but typically you then can see when you might need to start getting a construction loan. This one shows different activities, again, that will happen during the campaign, lead gift meetings, major gift meetings, and other types of activities through the campaign. It's a little small, but you get the picture that there's a bunch of different things, and there's fun colors. I'm going to pause there to see, before we're going to talk just for a minute about a feasibility study. But Rachel, were there questions either about the staffing and systems or the timing?
Just looking. Someone asked a question, something about the fundraising meetings in the previous slide. Was that for meetings with prospects or meetings with your campaign committee?
Oh, so that was meetings with our prospects, right, Peter?
Prospects, okay.
Yeah, it's an activity metric for making sure that you have enough activity to reach your goal by actually having one-on-one prospect meetings.
Got it.
Thanks for clarifying that. So not every organization does a feasibility study before their campaign, but we highly recommend it because it's not a divergent activity, but rather the first step in being smart about the complex planning process. And let me just explain to you briefly what I'm talking about and what's involved. So here are the reasons to do a feasibility study. I'm going to let you use your reading skills one last time tonight. So there's a lot of actually exciting and important things you can find out in a feasibility study. This is what generally happens as a result of the study. I lied. I'm going to ask you to read one more time. It's a funny thing that no matter how well our consulting group and our client and even their campaign committee think we've got that case for support right in a draft, when we take it out to these interviews, we always find stuff that we've not thought of, and the case is always better after we've talked to a lot of people. And then it makes it the final version much stronger when it goes to print or PDF format or whatever for the campaign. So that's the outcome usually of a feasibility study. And then just the final thing, just in case you're wondering, what should I look for in a campaign consultant? Well, we feel the answer is pretty obvious. That's us. We're partners to raise more money now. We've actually helped almost all of our clients raise more money than they've ever raised before. And we actually have fun doing it as well. Here's a number of ways you can stay in touch with us. We've got a YouTube video that's one of the top trending videos on nonprofits. If you type in nonprofit fundraising in YouTube, you'll see my picture. I'm one or two, either number 1 or 2 at the top. And you'll get all these slides so you can have this information again. And I guess as the evening rolls on, there's more ums and ands. So Rachel and Ken.
Yeah, there's another question about what happens when you get a new ED or a new board person who said, oh, I got all these friends, I got these people, and it turns out if you start to do the feasibility study that may not actually be as the reality may not pan out. So do you guys also coach the like how you help the development staff or whatever if it turns out that it's not so great and you need to kind of manage maybe board expectations or an executive director expectations or whatever it may be?
Yeah, well, there's a lot in that question there.
I elaborated on it. It was much simpler than that. It was my fault.
So I mean, first of all, let's not forget that in any activity, nonprofit or otherwise, when you have more than one person, you've got politics.
Yeah.
So the board member who may think that they know all the people who are going to fund this campaign, you know, you have to treat that person respectfully and appropriately. And a feasibility study or even informal conversations, like I see, I'm looking in the chat and there's a Stuart Halpern asked a question about informal version of testing. You can have informal conversations either conducted by the consultants, or we can sort of prep the staff to ask those questions before the study even happens to find out what's going on. So there's a lot of ways to do it. And in fact, that Ossining campaign, we helped them raise their $8 million lead gift before the feasibility study was even launched. So a lot of different things can happen. Any other final things, Rachel?
Not there. Nope, I think you hit both of them.
Super. Well, it's been an honor.
Yeah, I'll ask a question. Let's just put it out there. How are consultants paid? Is it an hourly fee? Is it a percentage of money raised? And for those of us small organizations that do not have development staff, like at what point, how much can you outsource?
Yeah, that's a great question. So different consulting firms structure this in different ways. We basically get a understanding of the sort of the magnitude of the whole project, and then come up with a retainer fee for the scope of work and discuss it with our clients, make sure it's within something that they feel is reasonable. And then that fee is usually paid out monthly. And we usually, like for a feasibility study, it's a 3 to 5 month period. So we get to both build trust and get to know each other before we get further involved. And if there's a project that's not a feasibility study, it's usually a 6 month thing. So again, it's a period of time where we can get a lot done, but we're not signing up for a 5-year stint before we get to know each other.
Got it. Thank
But
you.
you asked about percentage. I'm really against that. I think that is very difficult to explain to a donor how this consultant person is going to get a percentage of their $100,000. You don't want to do percentage.
Yeah, it's pretty much frowned upon in the industry.
Yes.
Right, but in the end of the day, you're taking some large portion out of your operating budget to cover the expense. Maybe you categorize it towards, fundraising.
Well, right, but I think what we meant was that the fundraising consultant should
Right.
not say, I'm going to take a percentage.
Right, I understand that, and it's also getting your board. I mean, I'm sure a lot of boards out there and executive directors are saying, like, we have to spend money to make money. I mean, that's some of the case that maybe even before you hire a staff person or hire a consultant, that's part of the. I mean, so how do you help coach that? What kind of advice could you give to the executive director or or assuming there's no development person, convincing the board that spending money on fundraising, whether it's staff, systems, or a consultant, is a good use of funds?
Yeah, that's a really, it's either challenging or easy depending on where the board is at.
Mhm.
And, for a capital campaign, like we said earlier, in terms of the dollar goal, it's going to be wrapped in to the overall costs. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily easy to find the money at the beginning, but it's going to pay for itself. And you want, anything we do, we want to make sure that, the whole organization is looking at the amazing, results that are happening, and that whatever our fee is de minimis compared to that. There might be a hump to get over to get started.
Right.
So hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that's look, a lot of the people in our network are small, and everyone needs help. And you've probably seen this too, the top job postings that have come that I've seen around, everyone's looking to hire development people. So people are spending money or certainly needing it. Here's another question, like what's percentage of the industry or nonprofits have in-house staff versus, is it replacement, is it a supplement for a consulting group, kind of like what you guys do, or is it sort of campaign specific?
That's a really good question, which I don't know the answer to. There's two things consultants end up doing, at least in our view. One is, and there's always like, sometimes one is more, sometimes one is less. Thing number one is strategic advising that is not currently inside the brains of the people who are working inside the organization, right? Because we've seen a really broad swath of the landscape of what can be done and needs to be done. So we can offer sort of help and support that people don't see. And the other is a certain amount of helping, right? Actual getting the work done. So with each organization we work with, there's a different balance of how much helping they need. We're talking to an organization right now about a national campaign in which they actually want the consultant to do some of the soliciting, which is not unusual. It's not what we generally do, because we find it's better to happen inside the organization. But, especially for small organizations, we need to help them find their unique solution for how to get to their future. And it's not always the same thing.
Got it. And you said you guys do training. We obviously get a lot of questions from people on boards that, like you said, some are comfortable. Some people have no idea. They're very enthusiastic, but they don't know what to do or how to say it. And some people really needs a lot of coaching of like a script of what they're supposed to do if you're going to bring them out. And maybe that's not the right role for everyone, right? I mean, as you said, sometimes you
don't want a round peg in a square hole. But here's the last secret of the evening, if you will. When we do training of board members and staff members on how to solicit, we make sure that they understand this is an exciting and fun process if it's done well. And it's the actual antithesis of the typical give-get, where a board member is like, you have to go get this, and they're given no training on how to do it. And they're scared to ask their friends because they think they're gonna have to twist their arm and their friend's gonna come with retribution and ask them to give to their thing. So we train people that it's not that at all. And you actually raise a lot more money if you find a different way to do it.
Good. And I think you're right. It all comes down to really like, what is the mission and do you believe in it? And it's, people who are really excited about the cause and stuff makes it, I'm sure, a lot easier to kind of harness that into the development phase and the details of asks and the campaign. So.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. I want to say thank you to Peter and to, I'm just checking, we don't seem to have any more questions there, but thank you, Peter. Thank you, Betsy, for sharing your wisdom. For those who asked, we will get the slides to you, which including all the links to the various pages that Peter shared and any other resources we always like to share. If anyone else has some other good best practices, please share. We like to, we save all of our videos on our YouTube channel. So you can refer to these later. And gosh, Peter, I hope we need to add some tags. We can get up on that search function as high as you are.
Yeah.
This may
Good luck.
This may boost your popularity, maybe, who knows. Anyway, thank you for everyone for joining us. Again, as Ken mentioned earlier, YANA is a nonprofit ourselves. We do all these programmings. Our lovely speakers, Betsy and Peter, and all of our speakers do that out of the graciousness of their expertise and wanting to help all of you. And yes, the slides will be coming. We will get those. So you can have the video and the slides and resources. We always send out, post all of our events. So if you registered for the event, if you had to leave early, if you know a friend who registered and couldn't make it, don't worry. We will get you all the materials out there to you. So Betsy, Peter, thank you. I hope this helps everyone, and thank you for joining us. And we will definitely see you at the next YANA event, if not sooner. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thanks.
An honor.